I've seen a lot of change, been through a lot of pain.
Before every scene, it was basically people would go, okay, so what's this scene about?
Mm.
and it would be a case of, well, your guess is as good as mine. And that's I guess that's the thing I've learned from this, is that, you know, there are concepts where the director should know the story inside out, and especially the writer. So I'm both those two things on this movie, but I didn't know the story, but I don't feel that that's a weakness. And I used to enjoy, like, when I would meet actors, I used to enjoy actually saying to them, like, they're coming, like, I'm basically a nobody in the film industry, okay? So the only reason they're coming to me, and we got some pretty good cast around the world, people from Hollywood and various people.
Yeah.
But the only reason I think well, I don't know for the life of me why they did this movie, but I think it's because they thought, okay, we've got a guy I haven't heard of, but he's written a novel. It's a published novel, and he's written a script. So I think the only reason they were coming to me is because they thought, well, he's going to know the story inside out, which is kind of like cinema 101. The writer and director really know the story, and that should benefit the actor. So I used to enjoy suddenly saying to them on the first meeting, I don't know the story. And I would leave that hanging, and they look at me like, wait, what? And then I would say to them, but we're going to find it together. And I found that after a while, the actors are not used to this. But after, not after a while, but I mean, on the first call, they would look at me and start to go, actually, that's kind of cool. And so a lot of this process was about freeing the actor so that they could be and I was being a bit mischievous. Like, I knew parts of the story, but I wanted to evolve it. Do you know what I mean? And this is kind of, early on in cinema, say before in the 80s, cinema was a lot more free flowing, and you could evolve things. Like, a classic example is Francis Ford Coppola in Apocalypse Now. He didn't know the third act. He went into the jungle, and the studio just said, okay, you'll find it in there. So a lot of this was about evolving it as we went. Now, we had a base story, don't get me wrong, and it was pretty good, but then most of that we threw out, and we replaced it with something better. And I'll admit that. And I actually think, in a weird way, it was also, how can you say it? It was a paradox, because the more I sort of collaborated with people on the story, the more it became my vision. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you said about 75% of the dialogue was improvised, but it's been interesting for me because I've been sort of on the sidelines of this project from day one, in a sense of just talking to you through email,
Yeah.
And I've just seen it progress so much that it's kind of like when I took a moment earlier to just sort of think about how far you've come, really, because like you say, you started with a book and you're just kind of one guy, in your home base in Sydney. And this thing has just sort of grown into one of the most experimental and ambitious films that I kind of have seen, really. And as a first-time director as well, that's incredible.